Well, hello, and welcome to Hobby Hotline, episode 306. Honored to be part of this one. To my, depending on what side you're sitting on, next to me is Horatio, and in the square, I think we got Dr. James Beckett. How are you guys doing today?
Great.
Doing good, Danny.
We got some people already in the chat room. Mad City, good morning. Good morning. And Chris, if we're your favorite peeps, get new friends. We're not that exciting, but we appreciate the compliment. Um, Guys, it seems like a kind of a quiet, interesting time in the hobby, but there's a couple pieces of, I think, news. One specifically with PSA that we'll get to. But Ruben says, great to see Dr. Beckett. Oh, and Danny too. Thank you, Ruben. The card is in the mail. The I want to start out with actually the Top Shot because that's got a little bit of depth to it. I owned a Top Shot for the fun of it. Then I bought a couple more for the fun of it. I never did it thinking I would open a pack and get a huge card just like real packs. But I think I finished with 5 or 6 Top Shots after I sold them. But now they've been accused or found guilty and have a settlement to reimburse Top Shot owners, saying the Top Shot platform was a securities platform and not proper to do what they were doing. The big settlement is 4 cents per moment. So you'd have to own a lot of moments to get any money back out of this. I think I've got about a quarter coming back that I'll have to pay taxes on. We'll see. Horatio, I know you were a big Top Shot fan. What do you think of this?
There are a couple of things that went in with part of the settlement says that from going forward, that plaintiffs can't call NFTs Top Shot moments securities anymore. So that's part of the settlement. So what's funny is kind of like we're settling that these were unsecured, securities, unregistered securities. But moving forward, we're not going to call them securities anymore. We can't call them securities anymore. The plaintiffs can't. It's $4 million for me. It's a drop in the bucket for Dapper Labs. It's kind of gets them to move away from some of the things that they did wrong in the past. They froze the accounts of account holders. For a long time. There was a long period of time there where we couldn't get any money out. It was like a two, three month period where you couldn't get anything out. So I think to me that's the most important thing. I think 4 cents a moment is kind of a joke. So it's more of like a slap on the wrist kind of deal. It's more of a negative publicity for Top Shot. I still am a fan of Top Shot, even though I haven't bought a moment in quite some time there. I think that digital collectibles have a future. That's just me. It's more. I get it. You could just kind of clip a little bit of a YouTube, video, and it's yours. But we could say that about so many other things. I could say, I could get a copy of the Mona Lisa, right, and hang it up in my living room. It doesn't mean I own the Mona Lisa. And we can go deeper and deeper into these kind of rabbit holes. But Dapper Labs is the license holder for these moments. NBA has given them the license, and there's a certain gravitas to that, and they're going to have pull as long as they have that license. They're going to have that pull for collectors.
Dr. Beckett, what do you think of Top Shot? I'm sure you bought thousands and thousands of moments.
I'm famous for saying that I'm more worried about FOE than FOMO. I don't want to be embarrassed, and I'm going to miss out. I have a good friend that's very savvy, and he took a pretty strong position in Top Shot. But what he did is he immediately zero costed what he had. In other words, when the stuff went up double, he sold half of it. So now what he has left is he has zero in it, even though he really doesn't have zero in it, but it's like that. But so Horatio, you're saying you get to keep your stuff. It's just they're getting a slap on the wrist. This is a penalty where they have wronged the holders of these not securities. And so to not call them securities anymore, this is their penalty. And you keep your stuff. But it's still, it wasn't a difficult platform. I mean, it wasn't it. The securities aspect is they were like holding your money, and you couldn't get your money out very easily. Isn't that? And how has that changed? Was it just the words they're not allowed to use?
Yeah. So as far as like this settlement, right? And there might be some other lawsuits that other people kind of get together and kind of go against Top Shot or Dapper Labs. But yeah, this settlement basically says moving forward, whoever accepts this settlement, we can't then go and claim as another part of a settlement that those were securities or unregistered securities. So that kind of blocks you out from other lawsuits.
Right.
But like you mentioned before, I think that the biggest deal was, and they're also settling that for a long time, users couldn't get their money out of the platform. And to me, that was the biggest mistake that they made, or the biggest kind of problem that they had. Um, it just didn't seem right, and you couldn't understand why. So a lot of times, people were selling their moments for $2, $3, $4,000, and it was stuck in this digital wallet. On their blockchain. They use the Flow blockchain, um, and then you couldn't get it out. So it didn't really matter if you were selling, because you didn't have access to your money. Eventually, that did get resolved, but it took a while.
Yeah, nobody's accusing them of stealing the money.
Yeah.
It's just it was like a security, but not really. And in the stock market, when you settle up, you get your money back pretty quick. And so the fact that they weren't was I guess it's only a PR problem.
Yeah, it is a PR problem.
It wasn't illegal, but it wasn't illegal
In terms of like holding the money.
of holding the money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they said that a couple of people also couldn't get their money out because depending on the state you were in, here's the problem. It was crypto. Basically, what you were doing is you were dealing with a cryptocurrency float. And so what they were saying was, well, your state doesn't have a really good regulations or laws regarding cryptocurrency and how we can transfer this stuff between, a digital wallet that holds a digital crypto, or a regular bank account. So they were their thing was that they're working on those regulations. They're working on not violating any laws involving cryptocurrency. And that's what allowed them to kind of hold on to that money, or that was their reason for holding on to the money, is they didn't want to run afoul of any laws in any particular state. So for example, me in New York State, I didn't have access to that money for months. And even when you did, you had to pay like a big penalty. You had to pay like a $40 fee to get your money out of the account. It was a bit of a wild west involving crypto, digital collectibles. And now the funny thing is, me and Danny were talking, we're getting 4 cents back a moment, which is, like you said, it's just negative publicity.
But you're not getting it back. You're getting it's found money. You're keeping your moments. You're not surrendering your moments.
You're not surrendering your moments.
Case ratio for it's not Dapper Labs' fault that they were premature, that the state regulations were not in place. They had a pretty good idea, but in the execution, they got blocked by certain states being behind, and they maybe thought things were going to happen very quickly. But so you're kind of defending them, I think.
I mean, I'm just looking at it from their perspective. I could say, because listen, I bought a couple of NFTs, and these were NFTs. There was no roadblock like that. If you're buying an NFT from wherever, from OpenSea, let's say, and I don't know if that rings a bell to anybody. I don't know if I'm losing listeners, but if you buy an NFT from OpenSea, which is one of the bigger NFT marketplaces out there, and you have a digital wallet, that stuff comes in and out, within seconds. And so if you're Top Shot and you're using a blockchain, Flow blockchain, it wasn't compatible with too many other digital wallets. That's the other thing. So yes, they were early, but they should have been able to kind of had the mechanisms or the structures to kind of, get this stuff in and out quickly.
No, they did have all the structures for getting stuff in. They didn't have structures for getting it out, including your money. So if you did want to cash out, that was the problem. So they made it easy to get in, difficult to get out, and that there's a lot of grumbling about that.
Well, it's also one of those things where if you don't have a marketplace of buyers, it's going to be self-destructing anyway. So people have to have confidence in the platform, And I think that's one of the bigger things that happens with this settlement.
Well,
Secondary market. Yes. Good point.
secondary market buyers.
Yep.
They made it easy to come in, a lot of hubbub, and hey, this is going to be great. But the secondary market is what's critical in any collectible field. Otherwise, it's just a trinket. If it's only one person buys it, there has to be some exchange afterwards and a market made. And if that's has a lot of friction, and this was extreme friction,
Yep.
because you had to wait a long time. I mean, it's like grading. You're sending your cards in for grading, and if you got to wait a year to get them back, if it was supposed to be 30 days, then people will be frustrated.
Yeah. Want to get caught up. I asked in the chat room if anybody had actually bought an NFT or, excuse me, bought a Top Shot specifically, and pretty much low usage. I think we were 0 for 7 or 0 for 8 on responses. So that Top Shot and Dapper Labs might have some work to do. There's one comment real quick that I think, and this is a mea culpa for not starting off with this. Orlando Cepeda, rest in peace. He did pass away yesterday. And the great giant, the first designated hitter in Red Sox history, had a lot of leg problems, but made the Hall of Fame through the Veterans Committee, and for a period of time was as good of a power hitter as there probably was in the National League. Either of you have thoughts on Cepeda?
I'm going to do a tribute to him. I think maybe later today. I think it's really tricky when I figure out when I on my podcast if I do a tribute, but then if I don't do a tribute, does that mean I didn't like the guy or he's not hobby worthy? I mean, Orlando Cepeda, comes in through the Veterans Committee, but as a guy who saw him play, he was a feared hitter, and so I'm gonna gather my thoughts and do something about that. He's very worthy Hall of Famer, no question about that. But he's probably in that middle rank. I'm having a hard time getting at this. He's not the absolute best, and he's not the worst. He's a legit Hall of Famer, but he's in the middle.
Yeah, as I always say,
as a superstar.
I always say not everybody can be Babe Ruth. That doesn't make you not a Hall of Famer.
But they made him wait. They made him wait for non-baseball reasons.
Yes, in today's world, it might be silly even. Horatio, did you know much about Cepeda before the tributes? I mean, he was a West Coast guy, so a lot of East Coast people, I think, were not as familiar with him. What did you know about Cepeda, and have you seen any of the tributes?
Yeah, I mean, my introduction to baseball was, the obvious greats like, Willie Mays, Babe Ruth, Hank Aaron. And then my dad was teaching me about the game. And then the next was all the Latino greats, the early Latino greats. So Cepeda was one of them, Marichal, Tony Perez. He grew up with watching the Big Red Machine with Dave Concepcion, and all those guys. So Cepeda was always a name that I admired. Along with other Latino American, Latino players that were out there. So big name. I don't collect Cepeda, but I've always admired his game. I know he was a big power hitter. And my dad always just said that, these were guys that could play in today's game and destroy the pitchers that he was talking about, the modern day pitchers. So that's as much as I know about Cepeda. I know that him and Clemente were close. I know Clemente was a big influence on him, and in return, so was he. And so Clemente being one of my heroes, I got to know a little bit more about, I read about Cepeda quite a bit.
Cepeda was the second Puerto Rican Hall of Famer, and if you look at the gap between Clemente and Cepeda, there was a couple decades in there. So good to see that changing more recently. All right, Dr. Beckett, you are getting lots of free marketing here. It says your podcast is a must listen. You can't get that access, information, analysis anywhere else, well, except for here from Mookie.
No, let me respond and say Mookie Chilson's comments to me are a must read he's always got interesting things, commenting or sending me stuff. So I enjoy his response to the things that I'm doing. So it's nice to know when somebody appreciates what you're doing. So thank you, Mookie.
And Vintage Eyeball Card says, I've been enjoying Dr. Beckett's father and son videos. I think
a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I mean, it's a tradition now for 4 or 5 years that I pick 3 or 4 hobby fathers and sons, and it's unpredictable, Danny. You know, when you get start with the Newmans, then
right.
where I did a threefer with them. So that's been a lot of fun, but that's during the Father's Day week. So,
well, very cool. Couple more hellos. Orlando, and a shout out to his channel as well. He did a great Negro League set video, so shout out there. Somebody, Bazooka Tom, he has a top shot. So just, Horatio, I wanted to throw that out there so you weren't alone.
I'm not alone.
And I told you, I think I have 1 left or 2 left, so I don't want to lie about that.
But Horatio, you can't trade with him. You could talk about your experience, but you have to be intermediated by the platform. And so the camaraderie of a private sale or a trade or something, I think these digital collectibles are difficult. The blockchain, with the chain of custody, it's not like other collectibles.
No doubt. I mean, I think the speed bumps to the future are plenty, but I think there's a future there. Cepeda was a terror in '67. Yes. Orlando, Cepeda used a heavy bat. I have a game used that is close to 36 ounces. Love watching him hit. It's funny. The approach to hitting has changed a lot on the size of the bat you use. It used to be, the bigger the bat, the farther it went type of thing. And now it seems to be changing.
Exit velocity.
Yeah. And the barrels and the woods are getting so hard there that they're breaking. It's also part of it.
Force equals mass times acceleration. So you get more acceleration with less mass, or greater mass and less acceleration. You're still getting a lot of force. Cepeda hit a heavy ball.
Yeah.
Heavy bat, he smashed.
It makes sense he was the first DH for somebody. I mean, he by then his legs were more than gone. Clean Cheap Shot says bat speed without a doubt. Hank Aaron was known for his wrist. Now word saying hitters got to turn on faster pitching. Absolutely.
Probably, yeah.
Paul Skeens was not pitching in '67. And is there a Cepeda on the wall behind you, Dr. Beckett?
That's not the panel that has the C's, but there is a Cepeda in the section.
All right. One of the things that I think is one of the biggest stories in quite some time, and I don't know if I'm blowing this out of the water, but PSA grader notes. I think this is an interesting turn in grading. Grades were something I always liked, and this is taking it to the next level of actually being told, what to look for. Dr. Beckett, subgrades, grader notes, your thoughts on the extra details?
Yeah, newsflash. I mean, BGS had subgrades 25 years ago. But this is an excellent move on the part of PSA. I mean, they've got upcharges, they've got market leadership, they've got a lot of things people can talk about and be griping about. This is something I think everybody is pleased, and I hope they do it for all the cards. But it's an additional expense, and it also suggests an additional scrutiny of the cards and taking longer with the cards to make the notes. So this is positive. I think anything that provides an educated buyer to know what they're buying is good for long-term health of the hobby. So hats off to PSA. I would say I wish they'd done it sooner, but they respond to the market, and they've responded very well to the market. So this is market leadership to hear their customers. I think they've done the right thing.
And just to clarify, greater notes for every card graded. Well, right now they're introducing it.
No, they're not doing that, but that's where it could go.
Exactly.
And people have hopes, but when you're paying big bucks to get something graded, you'd like to have more than just a number.
No, without a doubt. And I think especially with the dollar values for some of the cards today, people get very worked up and certain, I think you get reputations as a grading company, and this hopefully, at least gives some explanation. Now, the next step is if you get feedback, where's it coming from? Well, it's coming from the actual grader. And from the article I read, they've been instructed not to write a paragraph, but just a quick note, dimple, top left corner, stuff like that. Horatio, what do you think about this?
Yeah, like Dr. Becca said, it's a good thing. A lot of other companies have followed suit. Not BGS is one of them, but even like newer companies like Rare Edition. I don't know if anybody remembers that grading company. They had these very solid slabs, and they had a barcode, and you could kind of scan it, and then it would tell you exactly why the card got the grade that it got. So like that was one of the selling points for new grading companies was we're going to tell you why you got the grade you got. So it's welcome that PSA's kind of joined that boat, right? It's like, we're going to do that as well. It is interesting that you can't share, like, even though you get it, like you get the notes, like you can't share that on any platform. You can't share it on eBay because that's considered proprietary information. So that's part of their terms and services. And I'm curious how long that'll last. I think eventually that'll also kind of be, challenged, and eventually, and I'm thinking about maybe in about a year, we will be able to have the public information. So I'm wondering why. I guess they're holding off on that now. Maybe they're just kind of trying to see, how the program kind of unfolds and how much information they really can give. But I think it's great. I think everybody wants to know, like, how many times have you heard, not me personally, but I've heard a bunch of people say, I don't see anything wrong with this card. This looks minimum 9, should be a 10. Why is it a 7? And so I think that this gives clarity, and this kind of takes away a lot of confusion from the hobby.
Well, it reduces their top line and it reduces their bottom line. It reduces the top line because when you get back your card and it's a 9, now it's not a 10. They saw it. They've got it. So you're not going to send it back in. And you've gone to additional time and effort to add cost to the grading of that card. But they've added a mystique to it, Horatio. I mean, by making it only available to the submitter, then the submitter's got an edge on somebody else. I know, it's my card. I have the inside scoop, and nobody else knows that this is not a card that could be resubmitted for a higher grade because they've already now identified that it has that dimple in the upper left corner.
And we won't get into what they could do to solve that dimple, so we'll leave that for another show.
What's going to happen is that somebody is going to cross it over. They're going to get a 10, and they're going to thank Kurt's Card Care for eliminating the dimple.
Well, it's part of the reason you wonder if they're holding back on the public notes, if that's the reason for now. But my understanding is this is all in their software. They can flip a switch and make these public. So I think you guys are right. It's only a matter of time till you put in, the barcode, and you'll get, not just the stats on the card, but you'll get the grader notes with it as well, and that'll all be public. Grader notes should be on the PSA website. I think we agree we're heading there. Orlando says all graders do grading notes, but they never shared the information. From the article I read in PSA, they only really entered it into the main system within the last couple of years, that they might have been done in a different manner. But as far as formalizing it digitally, which is the key today, that was when they updated their software in the last couple of years. I hope that grader notes speak to the positive qualities of the card, not just the flaws. Well, I think, and maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was going to speak to anything that affected the grading of the card not being a 10.
The point of the question is the way some people look at grading, but not the way the companies look at the grading. When you're auditioning for graders, you're not to hire a potential grader, you're not seeing if they can notice the positive qualities of the card. You're seeing if they can notice the flaws. So the whole process of grading is what is less than perfect. And so it's a completely different orientation. So perfect edges, like I say, the report card evaluates each of those. But to that question, it's probably going to be the case that the grader notes will not deal with all of the 4 subgrade type categories. So they might not say anything about centering if it's perfect. But if it's off-centered, they may say that. If there's a problem with the edges, if there's not, that won't be in the grader's note. So that would be my guess.
I always appreciated the subgrades on the Beckett cards. Yeah, this breaking news. Do you know what year that actually started, Dr. Beckett?
99.
99. So 25 years later.
Oh, the beginning.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you had it right from the beginning or not.
We were slow getting started. We could have started a year earlier, except one of the key things that was the holdup was developing and refining the process of what the subgrades would translate into a final grade, because it's not an average, as people have eventually noticed. Obviously, if you get 4 9.5s, you're going to have a 9.5. But if you have 3 9.5s and an 8.5, that might be a 9. But it seems like it ought to be a 9.25 or something, but it's not.
Is there a mathematical algorithm, or is it?
No, it's not mathematical. It's not mathematical.
Is it what the rumor's always been? You can't be a half grade above the lowest grade. That's what I was always told.
That's a principle that is true most of the time. I'm not sure it's true all the time. Again, the dilemma we had is that some of these rules don't apply equally in the high end, toward the mint as toward the poor. If something's an absolute perfect card, except for a bullet hole in the lower left corner, it's a 10, 10, 10, 1. And does that make it a 1.5, Danny? I mean, that's an eye appeal card, except you just don't look at the bullet hole.
Yeah.
It's a BB hole. Maybe it's a pinhole, so again, as soon as you make hard and fast rules, there can be exceptions, but that's a basic principle.
There's a couple questions here, and I just want to clear some stuff up. What was the reason for discontinuing the subgrades? Were they discontinued? Not that I'm aware of.
There was option. You could
You have to. You do have to choose to pay for them.
And again, this was after me. They allowed sort of a discount. If you don't want the subgrades, we won't charge you as much. That was not under my regime, because I love the subgrades. I think they're part of the service.
Grader notes should say nice things too, like, quote, "Wow, this was a stunner." Also, frayed corners notwithstanding. So that's why you got a 5. Like that's the bullet hole. The bullet hole theory. Everything's great, just don't look at the bullet hole. A Mookie pinhole card, a 10 with hole. I'm going to start using that for having no hair in the back. Just don't look at it. Focus on everything else. Oh, that's not better.
It's eye appeal, Danny. It applies to hair too.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I've got other comments I'll leave off here.
And choice of cap.
Exactly. And having a big head doesn't help. Horatio, you have too much hair to be on this episode, I realized. So, but on the grader notes, Dr. Becky, can you elaborate a little bit more on the extra time it takes? Does it take extra time, or would this be internal information only?
I'd like to say it takes 4 times as long because you're grading the card in 4 different ways. It doesn't take 4 times as long, but it takes longer. I think that's part of the marketing problem that BGS has, is that they're probably the slowest and most thorough graders. And it's so, again, it needs to be positioned, which it was originally, as kind of a premium service. It's kind of a premium service. So yeah, it takes longer, but it means attention to detail. Time was spent on each of those 4 aspects.
Horatio, if you had to pay for the grader notes on a value submission, would you pay for the upgrade?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it gives me any information that I can have, about my card, and I'm not thinking as a reseller or anything. Like, I'm just thinking about, I want to know why I got what I got. So I think that would help. I think, that PSA, it's almost like they have a rubric out there, right? They have their guidelines for grading. What is a 10? What is a 9? So I always thought of it as a rubric, and very simply, just go through, does this card meet the standards of a 10? If it doesn't meet the standards of a 9, and check. That'd be cool. That'd be an interesting thing. Like, the centering isn't quite the acceptable amount for a 10. There's no staining, there's no paper loss, whatever. So, you move up to PSA 5. So I always thought that that guideline, that PSA scale, it's very easy for people to follow if they're able to get that as part of their feedback. That way, like, the collector and the grader are speaking the same language.
I wanted to put this comment up there. Can PSA grading get stricter than it is now? And Dr. Becky, you touched on this, but does this affect the strictness of the grading?
Well, no, it just means that it doesn't matter for 10s,
Right.
and they don't have 9.5. So if they send back a 9, they're going to be able to tell the person of a good card. They're going to be telling them, here's why it didn't get a 10. And so that's not necessarily stricter. It just means they can't, if they give it a 9 with no explanation as to why it's a 9, or something that seems flimsy. I don't know. I mean, if it's, but well, here's an example. Okay, so they got a 9, but there was some wax residue on the front of the card. Okay, well, then I'm going to crack it out, and I'm going to wipe off with my finger, the tiny bit of wax residue that's on the front of the card, and then resubmit. And I again, that's a foreign substance, but it was something that was not intended to be on the card, that's on the card from the factory because of the gum or the wax. Well, because of the wax of the wrapper, if it's a vintage card.
Would PSA take that as a regrade? I'm wondering, like, I'm saying, like, if they're able to have a digital footprint of the card, right, and they know that this card's been graded and it's been a 9 before, and now it's a 10. I'm wondering, where the conflict there would be. Like, would PSA accept it would they be able to grade it as a PSA 10?
Well, again, if the grader notes say that they put it a 9 because it had, wax residue on the front of the card, I think PSA would accept it. And if they wouldn't, I promise you, SGC is part of the PSA family, but or BGS or CGC or any of them. Again, it depends on your definition of doctoring, and it depends on, in our industry, it's not okay for the graders to improve the card that's sitting in front of them, to tweak a corner, to wipe a piece of dust off, perhaps even, which I don't think is so bad. But they're articulating what the problem was, and admittedly, you're sending back in the same card, and and they'll smell it. I think they're going to do a lot more smelling of cards to see is there any foreign substance on there that remove that wax. If you use some chemical, which you don't need to remove the wax, then yeah, you should get bounced.
But microfiber doesn't have a smell, so if you're just rubbing it off, then I think that's easily something that should be a no-brainer that you can send through. Mookie asked about should they be public. We touched on this a little bit. I think we all agree that at some point they will be public. But also right now, it's only for the express level and up, which I think is $125 right now. So to me, this really seems like a toe in the water type of thing. Work out the kinks. I think the last thing they want is to have thousands of grader notes out there to the public that are wrong, or don't in some way do what they want them to do. And this way, they have a chance to deal with that.
Okay, one other thing, that if you have full transparency, which I'm not advocating for this for any grading company, but if you also knew not just the grader notes, but who the grader was.
That's like when you used to get in your pants.
Well, pardon me. Well,
inspected by number 43. They used to have.
Who's number 43 then? But I'm just saying that there's always this conspiracy or this theory of that certain graders at certain companies are easier than others, more difficult, more experienced, more veteran, whatever. And so if you knew who was grading and what the grader notes would be, you'd understand the process. But you can't really say, next time I submit, I don't want that guy. That doesn't work.
Right. I want Jimmy. Yeah, that'd be great if you could make a request on your submission. I'd like Jimmy. He's good with my corners, or something.
However, all grading companies have certain graders that have greater affinity toward certain times and sets and companies and obscure stuff. I'm guessing at PSA there's a few graders that get not every grader gets the pre-war cards, for example.
This is a good question. Are the cards reviewed by two people? My understanding was, and maybe I'm wrong, is there's somebody who checks it from a macro level after it's gone through a detailed grade. Either one of you familiar, Dr. Beckett, if there's a second set of eyes at any point?
I would hope, and this BGS at above a certain price point, not the price of the price of the card. If a card is $1,000 or more, absolutely there's got to be a second person looking at it, and not just the person that's doing the slabbing to say, oh yeah, that's the same guy that's the name on the label. No, there needs to be a verification, a senior grader, two senior graders even, depending on the value of the card and the rarity of the card. And I believe that happens. I believe that it's just good sense. If something's a base card, and it's not very expensive, then let her rip.
Rex got the sports card shop, 2 locations, got us on the big screen. He wants to know what's the average time it takes a grader to grade a card. First, I'll ask Horatio, what do you think? Because in my mind, it should take, a good 5 to 10 minutes, but I'm guessing it's nowhere near that. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think?
No, I think it takes 15 to 20 seconds. With the amount of cards that PSA is grading and the number of graders that they had, that might change depending on how many graders they've hired. But at one point, if you saw the numbers from GemRate, right there, you saw how many cards PSA was grading, and you kind of had this awareness that they had somewhere between 120 to 150 graders. And you were saying, realistically, they can't be spending more than 30 seconds on a card on average.
That's probably the correct answer, and I'm going to want to ask Dr. Beckett, but I wish it was the 5 to 10 minutes. Dr. Beckett, roughly how long does a grader spend with a card?
I did an episode with Greg Morris, a couple episodes about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, and he can grade cards in 2 seconds. Now he's not putting a number on it, but he makes piles. And by the words of the grading, and he can do it. He is super fast, and he puts it on eBay with his, VGX or X Mint or near Mint Plus, whatever. And he says he can do it in a couple seconds. So it doesn't take very long to get your first impression, which is what he goes with. But when you're paying $15 to get something slabbed, you're closer to what Horatio is saying. It's not 5 or 10 minutes. It might be 5 or 10 minutes if it's a Wagner or a 52 tops mantle, where you've got a whole bunch of people coming in and looking at it. But for the run of the mill card, it's way less than a minute. But on average, there's going to be some.
Well, I would assume that a $25 million Honus Wagner or something like that would have a lot of eyeballs and a lot of time on it, where my Zion base pandemic card probably went pretty quickly.
Well, the other thing is that we haven't gotten into, but in the dynamic of it, modern cards, which is why BGS was doing so great back in the day, is that modern cards take a lot less time than vintage cards. Modern cards, you're trying to figure out if it's a 9.5 or a 9. With with a vintage card, it could be 5, 6, 7, 8. There's a lot more finesse and it's just way more difficult to do vintage. So if you're doing a bunch of base cards and chrome and paper, either one of them, generally the corners are fine, the edges are fine, the centering is obviously fine or not. So it comes down to the surface. And so the difference between a 10 and a 9 or a 9.5 and a 10 is the tiniest kind of a scratch or fingerprint or something like that. But that doesn't take very long if you have the kind of lights that I'm sure all, BGS has, and I'm sure all the others have, is it blue light, black light, regular light. You put light on something, you're going to see if there's an imperfection.
So I'm putting in the chat right now. I'm curious for people who submit cards. When you look at your card to decide whether to submit it, how long do you actually spend on the card deciding whether to submit it? Horatio, do you submit?
Very rarely. Very rarely. And I only submit cards that I know, like just by looking at it, they're going to give me like a PSA 5 or 6 or higher. And I've done that maybe a handful of times to resell cards. And I didn't need a high grade, right? Like I'm not depending on the PSA 10. Like it was mostly vintage cards. And if I knew I was going to get a 4 or 5, and that's what I wanted for my, for what I want to get in return, I was fine with that. There wasn't a big gamble to having me submit. In fact, I knew that by submitting it to PSA, I'd make out pretty well. So, but I can't imagine telling that difference between a 9 and a 10, especially with these chrome cards. Like I don't have the eyes for that.
Well, that's to my point, is you spent significantly more time than the grader did.
No, I don't think so. If you send it in and it's at least a 9, but it might be a 10. I mean, that has to be what you're thinking. And that takes 5 seconds tops to look at a card and say, I don't see anything wrong with it, but maybe they will put it in the pile to submit. Or it's a vintage card that has reasonable centering, reasonable corners, reasonable edges, reasonable surface, whatever they say, it's in the 50s, you're looking for 5s or greater. In the 60s, you're looking for 6s or greater. In the 70s, that takes less than 5 seconds, guys.
Well, with all due respect, you're slightly more talented than the average person.
It depends on what if you have one card, you're not going to spend 5 seconds on it. But if you have 100 cards, it'll average out to where, it really doesn't take very long. If you've never submitted, well, then actually, if you've never submitted a card, then you need to go to a bulk submitter. And the bulk submitters in 5 seconds a card could say, you don't want to submit this. You do want to submit this. And so it's not a skill that requires 60 years of hobby experience, Danny.
I also think, sorry, Danny. I also think that these graders, they have so many, they themselves become so good at it, right? That they can kind of, take 20 seconds to look at a card. If that, right? Like I imagine that after a month or two on the job that you get really good at it and you get trained pretty well. And then you go from there.
Orlando, this is fantastic. And I'd love to hear more about this, that he attended the CSG grading school. I remember when they put that on, and the final exam grade was 10 cards in 20 minutes. Grader notes and catch one altered or fake card. Well, there's another aspect we didn't bring into it, was identifying fakes. And that speaks maybe more to the high value cards, like Dr. Beckett said, and more eyes on the higher value cards because people don't fake commons. But I think that's an interesting. So they're looking at roughly 2 minutes a card for a brand new person, because you would.
But that's not the standard for them, guys. I mean, what they're looking for, they're looking for graders that can find the flaws, and they're giving them plenty of time to do that. You can teach speed. They can speed up later. But if
Sure.
they can't see the flaws in 20 minutes, then they're not going to see it in 2 minutes. And the people, and again, it's like, have you ever been to one of these or these test things where you have an hour to take the test, and some dude walks up after 15 minutes and puts his exam book down and says, "I'm done," and maybe aced it. I mean, some people are just faster than others. But in the grading thing, you want, if they can't see the flaws, they flunk the test. And so if it takes them a long time to see the flaw, in fact, if they're sitting there thinking, is this a flaw or not? I'm telling you right now, if you think it might be a flaw and it's your card, it's a flaw. If you're saying, I think this corner is soft, is it really soft? If you think it's soft and it's your card, it is a soft corner. It's not a 10. Or I had a little damage here on the edge, but I don't know about that. Okay, that's how you flunk the grading test. You pass the grading test by, in 20 minutes, you've identified all the flaws, and especially identified the either counterfeit, altered, something like that. That's a really big deal. That's a really big deal.
How much incentive is there on speed financially? Promotion.
The incentive is to keep your job.
No, I meant do the grading companies pay more if you're faster?
No, you can't do it because and we dealt with this. Is that I'll tell you how to get. We had the slowest guy that we had was our best grader. It's because he got all the tough stuff, not tough stuff, but the tougher, more obscure cards. But the guys that were the more junior graders got a lot of the base cards. They could get a lot of speed going. You can't pay people based on speed. But if you don't have speed, you have to have that ability to see the flaws and to do it quickly. And if you can't, you're going to have trouble keeping your job. So there's an esprit de corps that we got to get these cards done, but we've got to get it right. And if you've got a problem, you've got to call the person. You got to tap the person next to you in the cubicle with the special lighting, and you got to say, "Hey, can you take a look at this? Because I want to make sure I get this right." And you got to have an esprit de corps where the dude sitting next to you or the lady sitting next to you doesn't say, "Hey, mind your own business. I'm doing my own cards. I want to make my quota, and you're slowing me up." They got to say, "Hey, I'm going to take one for the team occasionally. I'm going to make sure we, as a collective group, get it right." And I hope all the grading companies do it that way.
I love the insight on this conversation, by the way. Orlando at his when he went to the grading school said the cards were pre-graded by Andy Broom, who's the head, and you had to detect the flaws. He said he had a colored 71 card, barely detectable. And Orlando, I assume you caught it. I don't know. Did you ace the test? This is another good question from Ruben.
A veteran collector would get that, because as soon as I would see a 71 tops black bordered card in a grading test, I would think, "Oh my goodness, let me get out my black magic marker." I mean, it's just, but with the right kind of light, which I'm sure they're equipping them that, because you may not be able to see it with the naked eye.
And to your point, if you're using a 10 times loop with good light, you can grade a card in 20 to 30 seconds. There are videos on YouTube with Andy Broom explaining the grading process. And I think that's part of it is like you said, they built in the technology and the tools right at their desk. It's not like me sitting at my desk where I don't have the black light or I don't have the 10 time loop or whatever it is they're set up for success. And I think that's a key thing is we have to remember is, their job is grading. So all the tools and everything they need is right there. And Orlando, congratulations. Yes, they called me to offer a job later. Fantastic. Hopefully it's not because they sold you that 71. Well, there was one more comment. Yes. Mookie says, I would watch a YouTube series, Dr. B's Grader School. This is fascinating.
I can talk the game. I don't think I can walk the walk, Mookie, because my eyes aren't good enough anymore. I really can't see as well, but I know the concepts.
Orlando says the pace sucks, starting at 40 to 50, depending on experience. I think that's where he was headed there.
I think the pay goes up from there pretty radically if you're really good.
Andy is one of the best. I think you're talking about Andy Broom. Yeah, I think he's done a great job of just transparency. I think that's one of the things that we like in any company in the hobby. And Horatio, when a lot of people have talked about some of the grading companies, and Dr. Beckett, I want to make this clear: you have no involvement in Beckett grading right now. So there were some comments in the chat. Dr. Beckett, do you have any working relationship with Beckett right now?
I'm a customer.
There we go. Okay.
Maybe not even a favored customer. I don't know, because
there we go.
I get a good rate, but I don't go to the front of the line. I surely don't get preferential grades, but so it takes a while, but I get my cards back, and I'm the grades are the grades. I'm telling you, I've gotten so many cards that I thought were perfect, and they're not, but they're 10, 10, 10, 9.5. And I'm thinking, guys, what happened to the black label 10? I've never gotten one. And they just say, you bring us a card that's deserving of it, we're going to treat you like everybody else.
I think we're starting a new business here. How about a Dr. Beckett fantasy camp? I'd be asking questions all day long on grading. Dr. Beckett, how would you feel about 50 strangers coming to your house for a week and just camping out?
It wouldn't be 50. That's actually a possibility, but it wouldn't be just about grading, but a day here, is it just be fun? Just be fun. I'd probably have to charge, but it'd be fun to. It could be maybe before or after a show. Yeah, I mean that'd be fun. I mean, I'm getting older, and I've got things I want to share visually of showing cards, as well as sharing some experiences and opinions and insights. So I'm doing that on the podcast, but to do something in person at a show or at my house sometime, I've done something a little bit like that, but it's more been like a dinner or a lunch or something shorter. A day, not sure about that. It wouldn't be 50, Danny. It wouldn't be 50.
Horatio, I know that you have a good relationship with Andy Broom. Orlando says he's awesome, that he showed him his minimum size mantle to get his opinion. It's minimum size. Talk to me about Andy and his collecting, because I think people might be surprised, and I think you know a little bit about what he likes to collect in older, more rare Japanese and Asian cards.
Victor Starfin.
Yeah.
That's his guy. So Andy and I go way back. When I bought the company of the company he was working for, so I could get Andy. So he was working for a different grading company, and we bought it, brought in Andy, and Andy did great work for us for a long time. And then he actually left and started the sports division with CGC or CSG. They've changed branding, but he's a solid grader, really outstanding on vintage. It's like the Nat Turner thing with being the CEO of collectors. And me too. If you are a collector and you're in charge, you're probably going to make better decisions. Andy is a collector, was a great grader, and he was able to structure the new program down there on exactly what he, I think, liked and didn't like about what we had been doing and what he'd been doing before. And he knows his stuff. So it's not a surprise to me that he's had some level of success, just like Nat Turner. I love seeing a collector in charge of a company that's influential in our industry.
Yeah. And I'll add that, I'll say this much. I love, and this is a testament to Andy Broom, is I love CSG graded cards out there. And for some reason they're at a discount, it's an extreme discount from PSA cards. but I have so much confidence buying the CSG slabs, because I know what Andy and his crew kind of puts into grading the cards. I mean, not to disparage any other grading companies, but I'm confident I'd be more than willing to pay $20 less for a CSG 6 over a PSA 6, because I know that if I did cross it over, it would be a PSA 6. Yeah, he's been a really valuable kind of guy to ask questions about. I know that he collects stuff. They're expanding into Asia big time, and Andy's got stuff from these Asian card companies that I've never heard of, and that nobody has ever heard of, but I'm sure you'll hear about in 2 to 3 years. So he's ahead of the curve in that way as well. Not just the sports card stuff, but also like the TCG stuff.
Prestige Collectibles, Japanese baseball card, says, I've sold Andy many Starfin cards. I have a 2010 Andy Broom original Starfin art card that he made. That's pretty cool. Orlando says that he agrees with you, Horatio. So, I've never gotten that message on here before. So,
First time for me, I think, too.
Yeah. Before we pack it up, I always like to find out what you guys are doing for the hobby for the weekend. Any new purchases? Horatio, what have you picked up? Anything? And how are you hobbying this weekend?
So a couple of things. I collect vintage tobacco cards of Nicaragua. I'm Nicaraguan, so I picked up a domino card from, it's got different flags. And real quick, T58. It's a fish series. I just completed my Piedmont set, so with the red nose minnow. So that's what I just picked up. This is card number 85. I finally got it. So that's what I'm collecting right now.
Dr. Beckett, anything you're
Wow,
into?
I don't even know how to follow that, Horatio. I am getting ready for the Dallas show. That's not this weekend, but the next weekend. So that's from show to show, I'm processing what I got at the previous show, and I'm preparing. I'm going to take some cards in for grading ahead of the show to BGS. I'll drop them off at the company Monday or Tuesday next week before the show, because they do a lot of business at the show. So I want to get in ahead of that. And, I'm getting some stuff ready to go to eBay, getting some stuff ready to go to ComC, and then buy a few cards at the show. So this will be a quiet weekend for the hobby.
Yeah.
Other than today, the highlight of being on Hobby Hotline.
Right, absolutely. We didn't even get to the fact that the Nationals coming up. So next week, I'm sure they'll talk about it. But I think, we're kind of got that on the horizon as July comes on Monday. Horatio, do you want to share anything about the National?
Well, one thing. I've got to write an article for you, Danny. Hobby News Daily. I never forget, man. I know I turn it in late Sunday night sometimes, but I'm working on an article. It kind of has to do with the National. Actually, has to do with how you can help a couple of people that will be at the National. I won't be there. My wife is, she's expecting with twins, so my life got turned upside down a couple months ago when I found out, or 6 months ago when we found out. But there are a couple of guys. Eric Hecker, Rack of the Day. I've talked about him before. He gives away cards, so I'll be writing about that. And also Tim Virgilio, he runs Signatures for Soldiers. He'll be at the National as well, and he's looking for a little bit of help. So I'll be writing about that. If you guys don't know about them, look them up and see if you can help.
No, great call. That's what Hobby Palooza was raising money for. I think they set a record this year, but it's never enough. There's always a need for more, and that's true for any philanthropic organization. Yeah, absolutely. Mad City Bruce says, LOL, homework Horatio. Whoa, congrats, Horatio. In baseball cards, we call twins doubles. See? And John Keating says, you think your life was turned upside down 6 months ago? Yeah. So there's all the support and that you need, and you might be pulling a double shift. We'll figure out the details, but you might be on next week. We'll see, because then you're going to disappear on us.
Well, think about it this way: if you had a goat, a whale, a fabulous card, who wouldn't want to have two of that card?
There you go.
There you go.
Two better than one.
And guess what? You'll like one better than the other. You just can't tell them. All right.
Talking
Guys, thank you, Dr. Beckett, Horatio, to the chat room. This was really eye-opening. Sorry to ask so many grading questions, but I think this is something that everybody has an interest in, and a lot of things for the hobby. So we will see you next time. Take care. And next week is episode 378.
Wow.
307. See you later. Bye.
Skip numbers, yeah.